what the duck is growth mindset? What a brain strokes, what a brain hemorrhage, and why it is important. If you just Google it out, how you can achieve growth mindset so easily, do you think? And what is the process of achieving that? Hi there, welcome back to the Vinita Bhasa Growth Theory. And today's topic is really interesting. And this is the video number 2 for this particular YouTube channel that we've created. The whole objective of this channel is to help you grow, right? Now, today's topic is very interesting. I hope you have heard the concept of growth mindset a lot in your career so far, maybe from different YouTube channels, Instagram reels, different, coaches, mentors out there, influencers talking about it. Your bosses and leaders must have told you about it. But what the duck is growth mindset? We need to understand the core of growth mindset. You will see a nice image of, with clearly showing the differences between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. But is that really it? Is that how you can achieve growth mindset so easily, do you think? It's the superpower for any individual. We're going to be discussing this in detail, and I'm going to tell you what it is and how it's going to help you and why it is important, right? And what is the process of achieving that. I think that's where we're going to be spending a lot of time together on this particular YouTube. So I hope you're ready. Very sure somewhere down the line you have this in your mind that, okay, you know what, I want to get that position, I want to get this salary, I want to maybe start my own business. But then what happens eventually is that we kind of get bored with what we are doing, or we settle down, or we relax, and we are not able to achieve that because we are sort of looking for the motivation out there. But can motivation alone get you there, right? Remember one thing, the only gap between where you are and what your goal is the time, effort, and focus, right? Effort will only come when you have the right focus, and focus will only come when you have the right mindset. And that's what we're going to be catering today. So let's dive into this deeply. What the duck is growth mindset. So just imagine, right? And you must have heard about this analogy a lot of time, right? A glass of water, if it's full, I pour in the water, it's gonna overflow because it cannot absorb or contain the water that is pouring inside the glass, right? Because it is full. That's what when you have a fixed mindset. I know it all. मुझे सब पता है मैं सब कर लूंगा मैं सब कर लूंगी मुझे कोई बताने वाला नहीं चाहिए oh that's what fixed mindset is. So I know it all attitude, okay? That's what it is. Now, what is growth mindset? The analogy of water, the glass of water. Now, here the glass of water is 1/4 or half or 3/4, whatever, depending on your experience and your education, and your knowledge that you have built over the period of time, right? So, even if I pour the glass of water, you can contain. That's when you're allowing some more knowledge to settle inside your brain. You are allowing certain more information to get in your brain, right? So with this is what growth mindset means, that that, okay, if I have to go, if this is my goal and this is where I am today, correct? समझ गए ना? यहाँ पे अगर जाना है मुझे, तो वो जो प्रोसेस के बीच में शायद कुछ मुझे स्किल गैप होगा, मुझे वो अक्वायर करना पड़ेगा, है ना? देयर मस्ट बी सम स्किल गैप इशू, देयर मस्ट बी some any other issue, right? Or any other gap that I have identified, and I have to ensure that I first learn those things and then I move on, right? Accepting that is what growth mindset is. So I hope it is very clear first the concept. Now, I'm going to be deep diving into this further since the concept is clear. Now, how it is possible to achieve that, right? It's very important to first understand that. So, this is something to do with your brain. So, what we're going to be covering today is your brain. Remember one thing, you must have heard about this a lot of time. Your brain is a superpower. Whatever your brain believes, accepts completely, it is going to happen with you. And that's what you can term it as manifestation or visualization, right? So when we spoke about that, where you are today and what your goals are, the time, the three variables: time, focus, and the effort, right? What we spoke about. That is all related to brain. Time is something which is, of course, which is not in our control, right? But focus and efforts are in our control, and we're going to be covering that through this particular series of information that I'm going to be sharing with you. So stay tuned in. This is little complex. I would want you to, keep your book and pen ready, because you might skip on certain things. Please go back. I will cover three different topics after this, right? I mean, it's divided into three parts. So I would want you to first cover each of the part very clearly. So if you don't understand, please go back, with this to the video again, and understand part one, part two, and part three. That's when you will completely understand this. All right. First, right? How does it adapt to changes? Correct. We have heard about a lot of theories and stories out there, right? But it is very important for us to understand how does the brain function and how does the brain really adapt to new things so quickly, so swiftly, right? Because if I have to talk about the growth mindset, what is growth mindset? I have clear. You need to understand how it happens and how you don't achieve what you want to achieve, because you yourself is standing in between your goal and you, where you are right now, right? This is what we're going to be talking. So today we are getting deeper into this conversation, and we're talking about how in three different ways, all right, your brain supports learning. If you understand this, it will be easier for you to learn any skill set easily, any skill set for that matter. All right. I'll mind you over here, there are certain limitations to these things, because for me, like example, my limitation is languages. I cannot really understand or learn new languages. So every individual has certain set of limitation, and I don't want to tap on my limitation. It's not that that cannot be achieved. It just I don't want to tap into that limitation. The choice is yours, yeah, right? So we're going to be talking about the three different ways how your brain is changing, or how your brain is actually supporting learning. All right. Number one is the chemical, right? Here we're talking about how when you're learning something new, right? Or when you are reading something, let's say, or when you're watching any content out there, right? How your brain, is transferring these chemicals, right? Signal. So we're going to be talking about so when we talk about the chemical, this is where your brain, is actually transferring certain chemical signals between the brain cells, all right, communicating with each other, also known as neurons, right? And that's when a series of actions or reactions are really triggered, right? So let's say if I'm sitting in a meeting room and I'm listening to the meeting, right, which is giving me a message that I have to jot down certain important points, right? So that's when I'm gonna start journaling about those important points, right? Basically referring to your short-term memory. So once the meeting is done, I might not remember the entire thing of the what is discussed in the meeting, but when I go back to my notes, I will definitely remember a few important things, and eventually it will fade off. So it is just getting captured in my short-term memory, right? So that's the job of the chemicals that are releasing in your mind. So that's one way of how your brain changes to adopt or to learn something new. Hope this is clear. Now, number two is going to really blow your mind, okay? Number two and number three is actually very important. And when we talk about the growth mindset, actually we are referring to these two changes completely. We're going to be covering the topic long-term learning, right? That's when the number two way of how your brain changes come into picture. That is altering the structure, right? Now, what does this mean? Very clearly, we will tap into that, right? So don't get really worried with the jargons that we are using, right? Neurons and chemicals and altering structure, right? And one thing is very clear कि हमने जब chemical की बात की थी, correct? वो आप छोड़ दो, सब क्या होता है अंदर क्या होता है वो छोड़ दो. Technically, the bottom line over here is that when we are reading something, we don't remember. Now the part two is important, because that's when we are talking about acquiring any skill set. Okay, so it's very important for you to understand this. The first was all about why we don't remember anything. Is because when we are reading or we are doing anything passively, correct, or we are not completely engaged on it, and if you don't practice it, then it remains in a short-term memory, and then we eventually forget, right? We're talking about the second one is about altering the structure. Here we are talking about maybe, let's say, about acquiring certain habit. Okay, I'll give you a very classic example here. I'll start with an example. Now, what does this mean is that in London, usually, because this is the closest analogy I could find to explain you. So in London, what happens in order to get your driving license, for the taxi driver I'm talking about, right? They have to literally memorize the entire map of London, right? And they have to clear the test. So they have to memorize the entire map of London. Now, here what we're so this is what we're talking about. So if in order to you want to acquire any skill set, or you want to really preserve something for your long-term memory, you have to redo the thing again and again, go through the theory again and again, or you have to practice the thing again and again, right? And that's when it your brain structure alters. Now, but here we are talking about the neurons, are the neurons is strengthening, and they are getting far better than how they were communicating with each other earlier, right? So if you really want to acquire any skill set, you have to practice and read the content again and again, and that's when you will be able to completely understand the thing, and it is storing in your long-term memory with a hippocampus. All right. So you know how to really study things, or if you don't know really how to understand, or if you don't know how to really become an expert into something, then you will not be able to get there, right? So we always hear that practice makes the man perfect. Now that's the easiest way to explain you, but then you really did not deep dive into why it is that practice is important, because that's how our brain functions. You have to literally alter the structure of how the neurons are actually communicating with each other. You have to really strengthen their communication. This is what we are talking about in altering the structure, all right? The brain structure involves physical growth and strengthening of the neurons, right? Of how they communicate, their connections, correct? So that's how we have certain memories or certain habits which are built by default, because they need no effort. We will any which ways start doing it, start adapting to it, and that's what it is, what we are talking about. So if you really go back to a lot of books, it is always said that if you want to become an expert onto something, you have to dedicate 10,000 hours to acquire that expertise. That's, I do not agree with it. Now, again, no controversies here, please. That's my understanding of skill acquisition. Because there was a time where the 7 years, apprentice this worked, right? Where people have to undergo 7 years of training in order to become an expert on that, right? There was an era for that. Now the era has changed. Of course, if you're a cricketer or a footballer, something that sort of, I would not say that 10,000 hours are really required. But then, having said that, you will have to put in the time and effort to acquire any additional skill set which you lack, right? And hence, understanding this will kind of ease a lot of things for you in the future. The most fascinating, interesting concept of how the brain also alters is its function. Number one was about the chemical, how they are talking or communicating with each other. Number two is where we spoke about altering the structure, right? Number three is about altering the function as a whole. Someone who has got a brain stroke, right? So whenever so my mama, it's a very personal example to me. So my mama got a brain stroke. She got a brain hemorrhage in 2019. It's been almost 5 years now, right? The stroke, her half body is like, not working, right? So what happened is that she was a very active lady, and like the normal, she wouldn't eat sweet, and she did not even like eating biscuits or maida products. After that stroke, a lot of things has changed in her life. But there are two aspects to this story, okay? So number one aspect is that when she was going through regular exercises, we were also trying the placebo effect on her, and she was going through the regular exercises. There was a time where she started standing up also. After a couple of months, she started standing up like to that stage, and then the COVID hit, okay? What happened after that is exercise stopped, and my mama being dominating, like she would not allow any do the exercises and all, get her involve her into the exercises and all. She would only fear the doctors. So during COVID, what happened? The exercises stopped, and then eventually she literally accepted that this is how she is. This is the normal for her, right? This is what happened. So where there was a feeling, and where she thought that okay, now she started standing up. So first she was completely lying down on the bed. There was the evolution happened. She was lying down on the bed. Then she started learning to get up on her own. Then she started learning to, like take support and stand up. And then the COVID hit, the graph went down, right? So this is what we're talking about, altering the function. So here, if there are two things, whenever a patient gets a brain stroke, right? One is the body gets paralyzed most of the time, correct? And one part of the body is paralyzed depending on where the brain has got the stroke. Like if it's right side, then the left side of the body is paralyzed, and if it's right side, it's left side, then the right side of the body is paralyzed, right? So whenever a person gets a brain stroke, these are the consequences, and there are two things that possibly happen. And this altering the function means there are cognitive, emotional, and there are physical changes attached to this. Whoever you are, wherever you are, if you really want to change certain things in your body, right? If you're a very emotionally weak person, एंड यू थिंक दैट यू कैन आपको लगता है कि आप बहुत इमोशनल हो और लोग उसका फायदा उठाते हैं, तो आपको क्या करना चाहिए? आपको टेक्निकली फिर आपके यू विल हैव टू ऑल्टर द फंक्शन. ऑल्टरिंग इट्स फंक्शन इज फॉर इंस्टेंस enhance synaptic plasticity, may improve learning and memory, right? There are certain things, there are a lot of changes that happens. When we talk about emotional changes, we're talking about mood swings, our reactions, anxiety, depression, right? All this is part of our mood regulation. And third is the physical changes, right? We're talking about the motor skills here particularly, where the brain, when we spoke about the brain stroke, right? It can impair the certain motor functions, which includes, leading to difficulties in movement and coordination. What I literally covered, what happens when somebody gets a brain stroke, or could be Parkinson's for that matter, right? And then sensory processing is another physical changes that is happening, where brain function literally get affected. Sensory information is processed, potentially leading to conditions like sensory processing disorder. We don't really understand, correct? And then we're talking about the mechanism of how it happens is basically the neurotransmitter. They actually, there is a lot of imbalance there, the chemicals imbalance, right? And it usually happens because of medications, drugs, or a lot of stress, right? Which can alter the balance of neurotransmitters, impacting our mood and cognition and behavior, right? And hormonal changes to a certain extent can also impact this, right? Hormones like cortisol, which is called as the stress hormone, it can affect the brain function, influencing our memory and emotional regulation. I think this is pretty much it. So what you have to do, right? What you literally have to do is that the best driver of neuroplasticity, or the best driver of putting down this to the main point of growth mindset of how actually this all can be useful to you, work on your behavior. What I mean by this, the simple solution is work on your behavior, right? The part three is not much in our control, but chemical and altering structure is pretty much in our control. So what you have to do is that you have to work on your behavior. So if I keep on exhibit certain set of behavior again and again, that gonna become practice. That practice gonna make me better at that behavior, where when I start consciously, it will actually become unconsciously, right? Let's say brushing your teeth. When you were young, you did not really know how to brush your teeth, and you were always reminded, right, to brush your teeth every single day, right? And then after doing for years and years and years and years, you became, you don't need a reminder. Your brain has accepted that if I don't brush my teeth gonna get spoiled, and it's gonna and I might lose my teeth, right? So it's there, it's like completely, or it's become part of a function. Example is when you are actually learning any motor skill. So let's say, let's talk about learning a vehicle. I recently learned driving, right? So, when I initially started, I was so much conscious about the gears. Okay, brake डालना है, clutch डालना है, accelerator डालना है, भाई क्या करना है साथ में, एक साथ कैसे करूँ, मैं सब कैसे मैनेज करूँ, आगे भी देखना है, प्लस वो बैक मिरर पे भी देखना है, साइड मिरर पे भी देखना, मतलब कैसे मैनेज करना है, राइट? But धीरे धीरे धीरे, after a lot of practice, it's in my system. I don't have to consciously, like, literally pay attention to I'm now pressing the start button, or where my legs are, whether it is on clutch or gear or brake, right? It's not. It doesn't need any command or conscious effort from my end anymore because it's become part of my function. And that's what we're talking about. So if you want to, now going back to the main point, the difference between you and your goal is time, focus, and efforts, right? So if I want to be team leader or if I want to be at a leadership position, right, I will behave in a way that I'm already a team leader. Okay. Now, what do I mean by this is that even if I'm an entry level person, I'm an executive, I will walk into the room and I will ensure that I'm doing my task aptly. I am achieving my goals, I'm achieving my targets, I'm also solving the problems, and I'm also helping my colleagues to achieve their numbers, right? I'm being very much collaborative with my teammates, and I am assisting my team leader, ensuring that the numbers are achieved, right? That's what a team leader does, right? And I will also solve a lot of problems of the organization, right? Now, what happens is that you're gonna put more efforts because it's not just about you anymore. It's not just about your calculations of 8 hours, right? You're gonna put more efforts. You're gonna bring in more business. You're gonna solve a lot more problem that you were initially assigned to, and you're gonna be helping the organization to grow. Now, this is what I'm talking about. So your focus area has changed, right? And you're putting in more efforts, correct? And this is what we're talking about. This is a combination of smart work and hard work, guys. So I hope this was helpful. So just to summarize the entire thing, we discussed about the growth mindset, why it is important and how it helps human beings, right? What is growth mindset? Then we covered we spoke about the concept of where you are, your goals, and the three variables in between. That's the time, focus, and the efforts, right? And why growth mindset or the right focus is important to get where you want to be, right? Now, what needs to be done? That's how we covered about uh, how the brain functions in three different ways to support learning, right? So first we covered the chemical way where the brain cells, technically the neurons, triggers a series of actions and reaction. I gave an analogy of jotting down the points during a minute during the meeting. Number two is altering the structure, where I gave the example of the London taxi driver where they have to literally memorize the entire map, right? Then third is altering its function, where I gave the example of someone who has got a brain stroke, of how cognitive behavior and emotional changes happens to that human being. And then we concluded about how you can actually change your behavior to fasten, speed up the process of acquiring your goal, right? So with this, I hope this was helpful. Forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with more and more people.